My father cut me out of the will to favor my perfect brother, so I revealed his secret at his wedding. I found out the will changed the week the invitations went out. Dad called a family dinner and announced he'd left everything to my brother, David. He said it was because David had always been responsible and taken care of the family business. He looked proud when he said it. I sat there and felt my stomach drop. I had never asked for money. I had never begged. I helped with the business in small ways. I put my own life on hold sometimes to cover for things. None of that mattered. They told me to be grateful, to be mature, to let it go. My mother squeezed my hand and said family meant forgiveness. My sister said practical things about taxes and trust like it was nothing. My brother smiled the way he always did, the way everyone trusted without question. Things started feeling off when my father said the will was final and that he had sworn to make it that way months ago. I asked when he'd decided, and he said last summer. He said he'd been thinking about the future. He said David deserved it more. He told me I should focus on my career and stop being dramatic. I left the table angry and quiet. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to act like the wronged child who needed the internet to validate them. But I needed answers. Then I found something that changed everything. I went to the company office that night under the guise of checking inventory. The safe was supposed to be empty. Dad moved older documents down to the basement. I was shoving through old folders when an envelope slipped out from behind a ledger and fell at my feet. Inside were bank statements. Not just old ones, but current ones, showing regular transfers labeled consultancy fees to a company I've never heard of, one that matched David's Consulting LLC. I felt my hands go cold. One transfer after another, monthly, sometimes weekly, large enough to pay the mortgage on 3 houses. The dates lined up with when Dad had been tight about money and when he claimed he was making tough business choices. I took photos. I copied everything to my phone. When I confronted David the next day in the kitchen, he laughed off my questions. He said it was about consulting on a merger. He said Dad voluntarily signed everything. He said there was nothing to see. Dad told me I was confused. He told me it was business. He told me to stop being paranoid. Things got worse fast. I called the bank the next morning pretending to be Dad asking about transfers and got a customer service rep who told me they couldn't discuss details. They said I should bring a power of attorney to review anything. I lied a little and said I was a financial advisor and asked for any recent stop payments or unusual account agreements. The rep warned me they couldn't disclose specifics, but the way she hesitated told me what I already suspected. I hired a private accountant. I trusted that afternoon. She came that evening and sat on my couch with my phone open, listening to my rushed explanation. She asked for copies. She called the bank directly. She checked wire receipts, company registrations, invoices. 2 hours later, she looked at me and said, "This isn't consulting. These invoices are fabricated, and the company receiving money is controlled by David. The transfers went to accounts he set up 6 months before. Dad said he changed the will." My heart dropped in a different way. I had proof, not just a gut feeling, not just my bruised pride. Real numbers, dates, company names. I thought about going to the police. I thought about calling a lawyer and letting the legal process run its course. Trent, the accountant, told me to be careful. He said if I went to Dad with this and Dad refused to believe me, I could end up legally tied to a dispute I couldn't control. He said get everything documented, get it verified, and think about timing. The wedding invitation sat on my counter for a week while I thought. The wedding was 2 months away. David and his fiancée were planning a big ceremony at the country club. Everyone in the family was excited. My whole family would be there. For a week I couldn't eat. For a week I replayed the bank records in my head. How many theaters would need to be shut down before truth felt real? I read and reread every transaction. I printed copies. I had Trent notarize them. Then I found the email thread. I hacked. I hate that word, but that's the simple truth. I used an account recovery flaw. Nothing violent. I got into the billing email for the company that processed invoices for Dad's business. Inside, there was a thread between David and the accountant who set up the shell company. There were PDF invoices, with lines that matched the wire transfers. There were instructions to change billing memos so Dad wouldn't notice. I sat on the floor and shook for a long time. I thought about what revenge meant. I pictured my father thanking David at the wedding while I sat at my table. I pictured my mother giving a speech about family unity and me holding my tongue because everyone else said it was best. That night, I slept on the couch in the office because I couldn't stand seeing our house where this was happening. Things started getting worse. When I sent copies of the emails and transfers to an attorney who agreed to look them over, the attorney called me back fast. He said this was embezzlement and fraud on paper. He said the transfers were documented and there was a pattern strong enough for a civil suit. He said criminal charges might apply if we had evidence Dad's signature was forged or if David had used his power to alter accounts. He also said something else. He warned me that if I went public without Dad's support, Dad might double down and deny everything. He said it would become family versus child, and family rarely takes the child's side unless there's no choice. I weighed my options the way you weigh things when there's no good choice. Legal process could take years. Dad might never accept the truth. David would spin whatever story he needed. The wedding was fast and loud and final. It was also the perfect stage. For a minute, I thought about letting it go. I imagined a quiet life where money didn't mean everything, and where I didn't spend every holiday feeling like the only one who saw what was wrong. Then I opened another PDF and saw a signed contract from the lawyer who changed Dad's will. The contract showed David had paid a fee to expedite a trust change that decreased my share. The date was weeks before Dad told us he'd thought about it. The signature looked Dad's, but Trent looked at it and said he suspected forgery. That was the pressure tightening. I called the lawyer who notarized the will change and left a message that I had evidence we needed to review. I also emailed the documents to the trustee of the estate with a short note, review immediately. I looped Trent in and had him prepare printed packets. I had a paralegal friend make dozen of copies. I booked a cheap hotel across town for the wedding night and packed my suit in a bag. Then everything fell apart at once. 2 weeks before the wedding, Dad called me angry. He accused me of breaking trust, of meddling, of threatening to ruin his son's future. He said if I didn't stop, he wouldn't forgive me. He told me to stay away from the wedding. He told me family meant something and I was breaking it. That was the lowest point. My mom cried on the phone and begged me to call off whatever I was planning. She said it would humiliate them. She said they'd never speak to me again. I sat in my car on the curb and listened. My throat went dry. I thought about walking away then and just letting it be. Something in me finally snapped into place. I thought about every night I patched the company software when Dad was out of town. I thought about the nights I covered payroll errors they claimed were my mistakes. I thought about the weekends I missed because I had to reconcile accounts that others assumed were fine. I thought about the way they said I should be grateful while David took what he wanted. I decided I couldn't be the person who let that happen just to keep the peace. I came up with a plan that was messy and bold and probably illegal in someone else's courtroom, but it felt right to me. I printed every file. Bank statements, wire receipts, the email threads, the fake invoices, the notarized will change. I made a binder and another set of copies for guests. I emailed everything to 2 journalists at the local paper under the subject, "There's proof of fraud in the family will." I attached redacted versions of the most damning emails. Then I packed the binder, my phone, and a voice recorder, and drove to the country club. The wedding was bright and loud. People laughed. My mother hugged me in a way that felt like both apology and accusation. Dad kissed my cheek but didn't look at me. David's fiancée beamed like every camera was hers. The pastor smiled and started the ceremony. I sat 2 rows back. I told myself I'd wait until the toasts. That was the plan. Let them lower their guards. Let the room be filled with people who trusted and believed and would feel betrayed. The real showdown happened during the reception, when my cousin raised his glass to give a toast and someone passed him a note. He cleared his throat and said we had a surprise coming. He clicked the projector that had been used for a slideshow earlier, and the screen lit up with a PDF. It was my email to the journalist. The room went silent. The projector scrolled wire transfers. It scrolled invoices with David's company name. It scrolled emails with his accountant confirming the invoices. It scrolled tax documents with hidden transfers. Then someone handed the DJ another printout, and he started reading it aloud to the crowd as though it were a speech. These transfers went to an LLC controlled by David. These invoices were fabricated. These changes to the will were signed while Dad was incapacitated according to medical records. The will change fees were paid by David. The trustees should review these documents. People stood up. Chairs scraped. My father's face changed like someone kicked him. I felt shaky but steady. I had one thing I wanted to say, and I said it plainly into the microphone I'd smuggled. I found the records. I have copies. I asked the trustee to look at them. This isn't about revenge. It's about truth. Everything blew up, David shouted. He called me a liar. He stormed from the room and ran toward the parking lot. Dad tried to follow, but people stopped him. Mom covered her face. The room split between people who looked confused and people who looked horrified. Then the trustee, who had been quietly eating salad at a table, stood up. He told everyone the family needed to stop and listen. He said he'd been contacted and he had a legal obligation now to secure the documents and vet them. He asked David to return inside so questions could be answered. David scrambled back toward the door, but I heard people outside talking fast. One of the journalists had already posted an anonymous tip, and the paper's email got forwarded around. Someone called the law firm that handled wills and asked if the notarized changes were real. David's fiancée started to cry. She said she didn't know. She said this changed everything. David screamed that I had ruined his wedding. The next day, the law firm called Dad and said they'd put the will on hold pending a handwriting expert and an investigation into the transfers. The trustee froze certain accounts. The bank put a temporary hold while the audit ran. My father looked like someone punched the wind out of him. He came to me and asked why I'd done it. My mom sat in the car and didn't look at anyone. Now the pressure tightened again, but in a new way. The family called me selfish, cruel, dramatic. They said I'd embarrassed them. They said I'd made enemies and cost relationships. My father's lawyers asked me for copies. My brother's lawyer demanded mediation. The moment that broke me was not the shouting. It was a text from my sister that said, maybe you'd have been nicer if you'd been invited to the will reading first. Maybe you'll come to regret this. I sat on my couch and for the first time felt how lonely the truth can be. I had done something that set off a chain reaction. I had no control over every piece shattering. It took a while before my brain caught up and I stopped thinking in terms of right and wrong and started thinking about consequences and strategy. I called Trent and a different attorney and told them everything I had. They told me to prepare for a long fight and to be ready for attempts to discredit me. Then the real showdown happened in the probate court months later. We sat across from each other at a long table. The judge read statements. Lawyers made motions. The handwriting expert said the will change signature differed from known signatures of Dad at the time. The bank audit flagged the transfers as suspicious. My brother's defense tried to argue that Dad was of clear mind and that he had given David money for consulting. They said I had motives, that I wanted to hurt my brother. They subpoenaed my emails to the journalist. They tried to make me look like a villain who wanted drama. I felt everything at once. Anger, fear, a strange relief. The judge ruled to appoint a neutral executor to investigate further and to not enforce the will until the investigation finished. That was a small win and felt like a huge defeat at the same time. I didn't get an apology from my father. I didn't get a family reunion with everyone holding hands. What I got was the knowledge that the will wouldn't stand for now and that a legal process would decide what happened next. A year later, the reports came back. The handwriting expert confirmed the signature on the will amendment did not match Dad's known signatures. The auditor found transfers that were unauthorized and tied to companies controlled by David. The state began a criminal probe. David disappeared from our social feeds. He lost his job. The engagement fell apart. The wedding dress was returned, and the bakery refunded deposits with apologies. Dad was heartbroken, but he didn't defend David anymore the way he had at the start. My mother and I had long talks where she didn't ask me to forgive him immediately. She said she was proud, but scared. She said she had been wrong, and that she'd been protecting an idea of family that let people hide terrible things. The account holds became legal battles. There were settlements and restitution talks. I did not get the will back. The family lost money and reputation. Nothing about it was clean or easy. Months into the court case, my father thanked me quietly in his study for showing him the truth. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't say I was a hero. He said he was sorry for believing with his eyes closed. My life changed. I lost friends who only liked me when I kept quiet. I lost my brother forever in ways I never wanted. I gained a sense of space I hadn't had before. I started setting firm boundaries with family. I started dating again. I started focusing on my own career and building a life that didn't revolve around cleaning up other people's messes. People told me I was cruel for ruining a wedding. Other people told me I was brave. I stopped listening as much. I listened to the documents and the numbers, and to the quiet voice that said, you don't sacrifice yourself to maintain a lie. When my father and I visit Dad's office, it's awkward but honest. We work through things in therapy. My mother calls more often without a guilt trip. They both came to my book launch last year and sat near the back, clapping but careful. They don't assume, they ask. I still don't know if I did the right thing. I know only this. Secrets cost people more than money. They cost trust, health, future choices. If hiding the truth protects an act of theft, a lie, and abuse of trust, then protecting that secret was a decision with consequences. I still don't have a perfect family. Nobody did. The difference now is that we see the cracks and are trying to fix them honestly. I don't pretend everything's fine just to keep smiling at photos. I don't owe anyone silence because they prefer comfort over truth. Months after the case closed, I drove past the country club where the wedding was supposed to be. It was empty and got new paint. I thought about the projector screen and how loud it had been that night. Dad called right after I walked into my kitchen and I answered. He said he wasn't asking me to come back and be quiet. He only asked if we could sit together at dinner and talk about things that mattered. I said yes. I still don't know how I feel about any of it. But at least my father stopped pretending everything was fine, and that made the truth worth saying.